Hello, everybody, and welcome to Unless, a Stand Together podcast. We are high school students in the group Stand Together, which focuses on destroying the stigma behind mental health and educating people on how to create a better world through positive mental health. Today, we'll be talking about ADHD and how it impacts day-to-day life. Before we get into that, let's meet our hosts.
Hi, my name is Riley. I go to Shaler Area High School, and I have not been diagnosed with ADHD, but I do show some symptoms of it, and I'm going to get tested for it in later September.
Howdy, I'm Brendan. I go to Montour High School. I'm a senior, and I am diagnosed with ADHD.
I'm Caitlin. I go to Shaler High School. I'm going to be a senior, and I am here for moral support as I am not diagnosed with anything.
Due to the sensitive nature of the topics being discussed, we want to encourage you to keep your own wellness in mind. The exact topics discussed will be listed in the description, and if at any time you're feeling overwhelmed while listening, please take a break and/or talk to an adult that you trust. Remember, we are not experts. Anything we say is simply a matter of opinion and personal experience.
What is ADHD? I think that's the perfect place to start. ADHD stands for Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder. So ADHD consists of consistent difficulty sustaining attention, which includes hyperactivity and impulsive behavior. That's not everything. The entire, there's a bit of a stigma of sorts around it that is like a stereotype that is just ADHD is squirrel. No, it's not. There's much more to it than that. There's also a new psychological term, ADHD inattentive, which was formerly known as ADD. Now, this typically isn't used day to day. I'm sure a lot of our viewers use the term ADD, which isn't necessarily a different disorder from ADHD, just a different type of it, so we use the same name. Some common medicines to treat ADHD include stimulants such as Ritalin and Adderall. ADHD is a disorder marked by an ongoing pattern of inattention and/or hyperactivity impulsivity that interferes with functioning or development, according to the National Institute of Mental Health. Those with ADHD are often found fidgeting and can be inattentive to the task at hand. Some of the symptoms of ADHD include inattention and hyperactivity or impulsiveness. They're the main symptoms and signs. It is typical to see both of these shown in younger children. According to the National Institute of Mental Health, some symptoms under these two categories include problems sustaining attention in tasks or play, including conversations, lectures, or lengthy reading, easily distracted by unrelated thoughts or stimuli, running or dashing around or climbing in situations where it is inappropriate, or in teens and adults often feel restless, being constantly in motion or on the go, or acting as if driven by a motor.
So to get a basis of what we can relate to, we're just going to have a little conversation about this, right?
Yeah.
All right, so first question, when did you get diagnosed and why?
I was in kindergarten, and apparently my teacher was saying, she said that I would not sit still in class and I was misbehaving. I remember we had one of those pockety things that you have red, yellow, green in, and everyone starts on green, whatever. I ended up on yellow or red a lot. I was in the principal's office a lot in kindergarten, a lot. I remember my first day of preschool, actually, I threw a pine cone at a kid. We got a different principal after my kindergarten year, and I ended up in first grade still in his office a lot. But we became buddies. He knew me and he was very kind. He played trumpet. He was very cool.
So you just generally exhibited some behavior problems and some those are some pretty clear symptoms, and your parents got involved and took you to get a diagnosis?
Yes, it was the teacher recommended to my parents because of this that I get tested.
Gotcha.
And I was diagnosed, and I've been taking meds ever since.
I started thinking about there's stuff going on with me, and I don't know exactly how to explain it, and my anxiety symptoms, things I've talked to my therapist about, didn't necessarily cover what I thought was happening. And, ADHD has actually been really relevant on, like, TikTok and social media and, stuff that we're all on. And so I just kind of started becoming more aware, and I thought that maybe I had ADHD. And so I talked to my therapist about it, and she was like, yeah, there's no harm that could come from getting a diagnosis and getting tested. So might as well do that. And that was about 6 months ago, and I finally have an appointment next month.
You had said, your therapist said there's no harm in getting tested, whatever. That's the thing. There is no harm in getting tested, but there can be harm in self-diagnosing and just saying, I see these similarities, I have this, without getting tested or anything. And I understand some people can't get access to testing or anything, but saying I'm experiencing these symptoms is different than saying I have ADHD, I have depression, I have anxiety without being diagnosed.
Mm-hmm. Noticing symptoms is really important to, finding tools and finding coping mechanisms to be able to deal with them in your day-to-day life. And they shouldn't be ignored, symptoms of anything. But saying that, yeah, I definitely have this disorder, I definitely have this mental illness, is more harmful, because you might not, and you might be treating things wrong, or there's just a lot that can happen. So if you could talk about it a little bit, how did ADHD appear in your childhood versus now? Was there a big change?
I would say yes, but also no. I think it's a lot of stuff that I just didn't realize was ADHD before. I just thought a lot of I was very creative when I was younger. I read a lot, which is I feel like a lot of the stuff I ended up doing was different than a lot of the experiences of other people I've seen. And of course, everyone's different. I see a lot of people with ADHD say they have trouble with math. I find math easy. I find math fun a lot of the time, because it's stuff, I don't know why. It's just I can barely get through a book now because I can't just get myself to sit down and pay attention to it the whole time.
Yeah, I feel that as a kid, a bunch of random books, or I didn't read many series. And then in 7th grade, I started the Percy Jackson series. How does ADHD affect your home life versus your school life versus your social life?
Social life, I'm afraid to go out on a limb a lot. And when I do, I end up, I'll send the message, I'll be super nervous, and then I'll chuck my phone behind me. You've seen me do that before. I did that when you were recording the eating disorder episode. I don't know how to start conversations. I don't recognize social cues a lot of the time. I'm the one to text first, all the time. I never texted first. And so that means a lot of people I end up not talking to anymore, just because it fades out and I'm I don't know what to talk about. And also, if I know you like something, I'm just going to I will send you a lot of things related to that. Kate, I've sent you a lot of things related to the Owl House. But home life, I feel like I end up being a lot more, I am very out there with my friends. At home, I'm a bit more subdued, just because my family is with me all the time, and I don't want to be super annoying, because I can't be super loud, or else I'm going to get yelled at for being a nuisance to the entire house and stuff like that.
So I just wanted to ask, are there parts of ADHD that a lot of people don't know about? Because you've said before, squirrel tends to be what people focus on for ADHD, but it is a lot. It is a lot in a bunch of different ways. And
the other thing with it is when a TV show has a character that may be coded to have ADHD, whether it's explicitly stated this character has ADHD, or it's kind of implied, maybe it's undiagnosed, whatever, a lot of the time they're just comic relief. And it's that's kind of a lot of, I feel like that's affected me. And it's I'm always trying to just be funny and be that positive, I was always the funny one, and now I'm the sad one.
All right, so what are some specific parts of it then?
So there's the one, when I learned about this, RSD, which stands for rejection sensitive dysphoria. When I learned about that, I was like, wait, so this is a thing.
So for context, rejection sensitivity dysphoria, according to my therapist, isn't necessarily an actual term that's in any handbook of hers or any textbook, but the term has gained traction through the community of people with ADHD. And according to chad.org, it means emotional dysregulation when a person feels an emotion so intensely that the emotion takes over and it can't be subdued. So with rejection sensitivity dysphoria, Dr. Dodson says that the person experiences extreme emotional sensitivity and pain triggered by perception, real or imagined, of being rejected, teased, criticized, or being a disappointment to important people in their lives, or being disappointed in themselves when they fail to attain their own standards or goals.
So basically, it's like if someone says they can't hang out with you because they're busy or like some family thing popped up, you internalize it and you're like, oh, they hate me, they don't want to hang out with me, they're making that up.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
Yeah.
Like, I experience it daily. Like, if someone just stops talking to me with like no reason, I'm like, oh, I did something wrong, they hate me. And maybe that is the case. Maybe I did do something wrong. But also, that's why communication is so important, especially for people who, like, people with ADHD, people with autism as well.
A big thing is that we don't do implied. Implied things don't really, I don't understand them. I've never been good at understanding sarcasm or understanding things that are implied, especially in texting. I can't see what you look like when you're saying things. I can't hear how it's being said to you. So reading it, I'm reading it however it's typed, and I can't feel emotion through it. So I often assume the worst, and overthinking does happen. So yeah, you're completely right.
Or like when somebody just says something and they may not mean anything by it, it hurts more than you might think.
Next thing that people don't know a lot about, hyperfixations. Do you want to talk about that?
From what I've gathered about hyperfixations and what I believe is my experience with them, it's hyperfixations, something that includes people with ADHD. Some people with autism also experience it, but it's not something that someone without some disorder has. You get so sucked into something, like your brain is like serotonin. You forget, like you start to neglect like necessary functions, like going to the bathroom, eating. You like the only thing your brain thinks about is this thing. Sometimes it's also referred to as like a special interest, which sometimes I feel like, from what I see online, they're slightly different, but they seem to usually be used in the same context. Usually they come in phases. Like someone might be really into like a certain video game or a certain show, or like something specific like dinosaur, or something general like dinosaurs, trains, planes, cars, something like that. I've had phases where I go, like, I'm big into, when I was younger, I really was into Disney, and I'm still big into Disney, but I was like looking up everything about Disney. I wanted to know everything, like Disney World mostly, like Disney World, Disneyland. Club Penguin is another thing for me.
It does include people with ADHD. They do often experience hyperfixations instead of people with autism, but I think that there are some people who don't necessarily have those diagnoses that also experience it, or they may experience it to a lower level. But hyperfixations to me are almost obsessions, I guess, with things that you like that pique your interest, because like you said, it gives them serotonin and it becomes something that their brain needs to focus on, and it's something that you really like, that you only think about that thing, and it's something that you want to talk to everybody else about. And so that kind of ties into rejection sensitivity dysphoria in the way that you talk a lot about your hyperfixation or your special interest, and people aren't very receptive to that because they see it as just something small that you like, when in fact it's something that you've been focused on and hyperfixated on for a while. With hyperfixations, it's often a thing that you don't even notice how much time is passing and you don't want to do anything else. You neglect responsibilities, you neglect a lot of different things. And hyperfixation itself doesn't just mean like, I like this game, I like this book, I like this thing, I like this concept, and I only focus on that because it's fun. It can also be things that are productive, but often it's not. So you can hyperfixate on doing a project and like realize, like a project for school, and realize like, oh man, I'm really interested in this topic, and you don't stop like working on it for hours. And yeah, that's productive, but at the same time, it can be too much sometimes. And you again forget to eat, forget to drink. But often I know that hyperfixations, you don't always choose them, and it's whatever gives you joy. So
no, it could be something weird, like not weird, but something that you don't expect. You mentioned that don't end up noticing how much time has passed. That's another thing I've seen a lot of people with ADHD talk about, and I think I experienced something that I've seen referred to as time blindness, which you don't like experience time or think about time in the same way that like a neurotypical person does.
I can speak only a little bit to it, only because I think that I experience it in the case that I don't understand time in a timeline in my own life. Trying to speak about things that I've done, I don't know the order in which things I've done. I don't know, like, in my lifetime, I can't tell you what order things are in. I also can't tell you how far apart those things were. And things
how
that
long
feel
you
like
spent on something.
I can't tell you that. In a day-to-day sense, it's often, I think that I've done a bunch within an hour, but it was that I did a few things within like a while.
I think about, it's like, say it's 11:50 right now as when we're recording this. So that means that there's 10 minutes to noon. Noon, you're already like halfway through the day. We are recording again later at 2. And then I have to get to an appointment not long after that. So by the time I'm back from that, it'll probably be, I don't know, 5 o'clock. And then I have to eat dinner. And then I'm going to have to go to bed. So I have maybe an hour or two to myself later today. And it's like, you have all these things to do and you're trying to fit them in. But it's like, I don't want to start this now because it's almost this time. And then this time is close to this time. And then I have to go to bed. So then I do nothing.
That makes sense to me. I almost want to hear Kate's opinion on this because I didn't know that that was something characteristic to ADHD, and I didn't know that that was something that other people don't experience, because for me it's often with work. I go to work at 4 and I'll think, okay, I woke up at 11 and now I have to eat lunch and then I have to complete this one task, but I swear to God that task is going to take 3 hours, so I have no time to do anything today. I can't fit anything in. Do you feel time, Kate, do you feel that time works the same way for you or no?
No. Like, I'll be cooking and have like a 7-minute timer, and then like I won't be looking at the clock, and then it'll be later and I'll be like, oh, my thing should be done by now, and then it goes off within like 10 seconds. I'm like pretty good at that kind of stuff.
So sleep issues is a part of ADHD also that a lot of people, they may or may not know about, but having the obvious hyperactivity and restlessness causes issues at night when you're supposed to be calm and serene.
Your brain just doesn't want to shut off.
So sleep issues are credited to a few things involving ADHD. So the list is, it's hard to create a schedule for sleeping. I know that I sleep at different times every single night between 10 and 3 a.m.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
And it's often hard to tune out interruptions and stop projects and just go to bed. Especially once you're in bed, it's hard to quiet your mind and to relax. Stimulants such as medication or caffeine can keep you up. And often people with ADHD have anxiety, disorders, substance abuse problems, and depression. Those kind of things can make it hard to fall asleep and stay asleep. There are sleep disorders, such as circadian rhythm sleep disorder. Sometimes your body may not be in tune with the cycle and might release hormones like melatonin at the right time or the wrong time, and that in turn can make it hard to fall asleep. So other things like bright lights, especially blue light from laptops, tablets, phones, can throw off your body's inner clock and make it hard to sleep at the right time. Sleep apnea or restless leg syndrome, which I definitely have. Some people describe the feeling as pulling, throbbing, aching, or itching inside your leg. And about 2% of people and 44% of those with ADHD have restless leg syndrome. So what are some coping mechanisms? WebMD suggests avoid napping 4 hours before bedtime, avoid drinking caffeine 4 hours before bedtime, or if you take stimulant medication, make sure you're taking it as early as possible. Have a calming bedtime routine that doesn't involve your phone. Go to bed at about the same time every day if you can. Sleep in a comfortable bed in a dark and quiet room, and avoid, looking at screens before the evening. I have taken melatonin for the past, I think, 2 years now. I used to take pills at first of just like 5 milligrams, and then I took pills with 10 milligrams, and then I took gummies with 5 and then 10 milligrams. And recently, I ran out of melatonin gummies, and I haven't been able to get any more, and I haven't slept for a while, so that's how that's going. Sleep issues are very apparent. In terms of memory issues, the thing that I most forget, like most often, is words. I forget what things are called. I forget the word that I'm looking for. I forget words daily, multiple times during a day.
Train of thought.
And train of thought, definitely a part of that. I have both 20 trains of thought, but none of them arrive at the station. So the thing with that is that I will start a sentence, stop the sentence, go into another sentence that kind of follows, and there's often like a pattern that my thoughts go through. Like, I'll be on this subject, and there'll be something that's minorly related to it, and there'll be something that's minorly related to that, and so it'll go in a big like loop, a big chain of how I got to the next point. But to the person who's listening to me, it doesn't make any sense. Like, they don't know how I got onto that topic at all.
Yeah, same with me. It's a lot of like word association, but it happens like so rapidly.
So I tend to write things down a lot. Anytime a teacher has a thing where like we're going around in a classroom and we're talking about something, I have to write whatever I'm going to say down, because otherwise I'm not going to have any idea what I'm saying, and it's not going to be a cohesive sentence.
I have like so many notes on my phone, and a lot of it is just random stuff that like sometimes it's just stuff that I wanted to go back to at some point so I don't forget it. Like I have most of my passwords and everything written here.
I have a million things in my notes, and I'm really particular about where I put things in my phone in terms of like things I have to remember, because if it's something that I need to access anywhere, it's going to be in my Google Docs. I have a lot of Google Docs for just random personal things and lists of things that I need to remember, or things that I want to go back on, or things that I thought about. But in my notes, I have things like random thoughts that I think are like really cool, or random things that I've said that I'm like, ooh, that's something really cool that I want to remember later. Next thing is impulsivity.
I can talk to that. Impulsivity, broadly defined as action without foresight, is a component of numerous psychiatric illnesses, including attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD, mania, and substance abuse. In order to investigate the mechanisms underpinning impulsive behavior, the nature of impulsivity itself needs to be defined in operational terms that can be used as the basis for empirical investigation. Due to the range of behaviors that the term impulsivity describes, it has been suggested that impulsivity is not a unitary construct, but encompasses a variety of related phenomena that may differ in their biological basis.
So, impulsivity, what does that look like to you?
Really just doing things with for no reason, just sudden.
I really thought there are a lot of things. This is a weird thing with ADHD, with anybody that I've talked to that has ADHD, is that we don't know what's normal. And I say we, even though I've not been diagnosed, because talking to anybody who has ADHD who has been diagnosed, I'm like, that is something that I thought was normal and that everybody experienced, but it's not, apparently, or it's not something that is characteristic to somebody who's neurotypical. So impulsivity, something that I've seen like often used as an example, is blurring things out, talking over other people because you need to get a point out because you need to say something, or else you're either going to forget it, or you're going to feel bad because you didn't get to say it, or you're going to feel like other people are ignoring you, or doing things without understanding the consequences. So I know that contributes to a lot of behavioral issues as a child. And as awful as this sounds, I'm not painting anybody with ADHD as like a bad person, but it can translate into throwing things at people or hurting people, and often it's an accident, often it's not something that you intended to do, but as it was described in my childhood, like doing stuff without thinking and having good intentions can end up hurting people. Thinking that it might be funny, or thinking that just not thinking at all, it can hurt people. So go ahead.
Another thing with it is like having no filter. Like my dad often has said that I have no filter between my brain and my mouth. I think you've probably seen how clear that is with the podcast. Kate, I think you can probably attest to that with everything I've said randomly that you've had to edit out. But I have a lot of that. It gets me in trouble at school sometimes. Not like trouble. It's just like a teacher's like, hey. So it's brought up a lot from what I've seen. People with ADHD or people on the autism spectrum have more sensitive to different senses than like neurotypical people. So like noises, like loud noises may be a bigger thing. Like for me, when I was a little kid, hated fire drills. Like there was a point, like second grade, I remember my second grade teacher would like take me out of the room and be like, hey, we're gonna have a fire drill in a little bit, so just to let you know, because I hated them so much. And I love her for that. It was because I could just horrible. I have a horrible like memory attributed to that too. It's also like food. There are certain foods I just cannot eat because of the texture. Like the texture is a real big thing from what I've seen. I can't do like mashed potatoes, applesauce. Like I gag. I don't like peppers. Like I'm fine with the taste of them. It's just like that texture of them is bad to me. I just can't do it.
I don't know. I have certain things that I don't like to eat or drink just because of the flavor. So music, big one for like positive sensory things. And I say sensory things because they can be positive, they can be negative. For me, loud sounds, I jump a lot. I get spooked a lot by loud sounds. Anything really loud that's sudden.
I don't like,
and it might not even.
I don't like buzzers, like the basketball buzzers, that kind of stuff.
Fire drills, definitely awful for me. Every time I have one, I nearly have a panic attack because it's just awful. Like the sound is so loud and so like abrasive and in your face.
Which is the point, but it's like,
I don't know. I feel like it's too much.
Also, sensory overload. I don't know if you know much about that. I don't know how
You ever
to
experienced it?
I think I have. I didn't ever realize it was that. And it made me think about, wait, are these past things I've experienced, is that actually what sensory overload is? So, I don't know. It's like just everything feels overwhelming. Like I just like start curling up in a ball. This happened at the musical a few months ago. It was just like there was a discussion going on because some people, like someone quit during the practice, and musical was not fun this year, I'll say that. But then I just got super uncomfortable, and just everything was like, and I was just like sitting like on the floor, but in the seats there was no one around me. I was just like curled up. I was like, and I think I threw my phone at one point because I was just like, no, not because I didn't want it. It was, I don't know how to describe it. It was a horrible experience. I hate it whenever it happens.
For me, again, going back to sound, loud sounds make me jump, and that might be either accredited to ADHD, or it could be my past with abuse, because I know that loud noises, people talking loud, made me feel scared and overwhelmed, and like I was going to cry. I'm not good in arguments because of that, and if somebody's yelling at me, I start to shake. But in terms of like good sensory things, like you said, music, specific chords that like I pick out are often like techno. I listen to music that I call loud, not because of the volume, but because of how much is going on and because of how much it's stimulating. Like a lot of stuff is going on, and there's a lot of background bass, and the like vocals are like a lot of different things happening, and it makes me feel good, and it makes me feel like I'm being shaken. That's the only way that I can like describe it, is like I feel like I'm being shaken, but like in a good way.
I do tend to listen to music loud just to block out other things, like legit. Like I will get it up so far the volume on my phone and my headphones that it's like saying, "Don't listen to volume at like things at this volume for long because it can damage your hearing." And I'm like, I don't care.
I don't know if this is from like an anxiety perspective or just my personal preference, but I can't listen to music where too much is happening at once. I can't have it past like half volume. Even like half volume is kind of excessive for me. I can't have my phone brightness too bright, like, because it just, I don't know if it's distracting or it just like hurts. I don't know. And also back to the whole sensory thing, like, I don't know why, but I have issues with certain textures. Like, I cannot touch cotton. It can't be in my hands. It can't be in my mouth. It is the most disgusting feeling I've ever felt. Like, I just can't do it. Like, it makes me want to throw up, and I don't know why. So that's a fun little thing. I don't think anyone touched on, like, textures being bad, but
I don't experience that much. I know a lot. I've seen a lot with people with autism do. I find a lot of textures like pleasant, but I don't know exactly what a lot of them are. It's just like, oh, I felt this fabric at like Joann's and it was nice. Or I felt this fabric at Joann's and it was not something I liked, but it wasn't like I'm going to throw up. Like it didn't like make me recoil. It was just like, this isn't like soft. This isn't nice. I don't like it.
Last thing on our list kind of goes along with the last thing we talked about is stims. So real quick, a definition of stims, self-stimulating behavior, better known as stimming, is a type of sensation seeking that can ease feelings of anxiety, frustration, and boredom. Frequent or extreme stims can signify its correlation to neurological and developmental differences. It often makes the person happy or more focused or more in control, and for whatever reason anybody does it is valid. It's not necessarily a sign that someone has a disorder or a disability if it's the only symptom present. And though stimming is often associated with autism spectrum disorder, it can also fall under a part of ADHD. And those with ADHD tend to experience sensory issues, which we talked about, and stimming can help with that. And when one feels particularly restless, they have to move and will sometimes move part of their body in a rapid motion, such as toe taps, hand or arm flails, sometimes like twitches, picking at someone's skin. And some can be verbal, like repeating a phrase or talking out of turn. And the need to stim can be often satiated with fidgets, which actually get a bad rep in school. So particularly for me, I fidget with anything I have in front of me. I've been this entire podcast holding this cat toy that I'm able to squeeze or like squish, and I have a fish that I sewed together, and it has like fluff in it, so I've been squeezing that. So squeezing is a big one. I'm sure you have some too.
Yeah, actually, again, in second grade, a lot about second grade here. I had a teacher give me a stress ball to keep in my desk that I could like just squeeze in the desk to be doing something. I'd never realized what that was for really back then. It did explode one day because it was one that was filled with like jelly stuff, and that was fun. I do have some stress balls. I have this thing called the Infinity Cube I got recently, and it's really fun. I've been playing with it a lot recently. I really need more stuff that's silent, just because a lot of, like, I have a fidget dodecahedron that has like 12 sides of fidgety stuff. I have a fidget pad. I've never really liked fidget spinners. Plus those got like banned from Montauk like that.
Stims can be done by anybody, neurotypical or otherwise. They're just normal parts of life, and just like moving around in general can help feel less stressed. When it's taken to a point of feeling restless to the point of needing to move your body, and sometimes, like, I know for me in particular, if there's a certain movement that makes me feel good, I will do it because it makes me feel good. And if somebody tells me to stop, it's not that I can't stop. I can. I'll just feel really uncomfortable, and I'll be really weirdly like moving in my chair.
I have a thing where also it's a lot when I'm listening to music because that makes me happy and stuff. I snap, but kind of like conducting snaps, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Sometimes I'll do that while I listen to music while I walk the dog, and so I'll have like leash in one hand, phone in the other, or in my pocket. But usually the leash hand I might be like snapping with or something while I'm doing it. Sometimes I'll like mouth along the words, but I also step weird because I'm trying to step in time with the song, or else I feel uncomfortable. Like I'm like, this is wrong.
For me, some stims can be harmful to you, like picking at your skin. Often you're not supposed to do that. That can hurt you. Constantly chewing or like playing with your nails can be harmful, and a lot of stims aren't harmful. And specifically, stims are different from tics in that tics you can't control. They're often jerking movements. They can be verbal, and you can't stop them. Stims, it's more like, I feel the need to do this, and I feel better because I'm doing this, but I can stop if I need to. So stims, sometimes I feel, to me, I don't do them often in public whenever they're weird ones. Like, I shake my wrist a lot, like flailing my like hand back and forth, or like jerking my hand. Cracking my knuckles, I do it over and over again, and even if they're like done being cracked, or cracking my neck, or just doing things. And I know that talking about this is definitely making me do things more, and like I'm being aware of it. I rub my fingers together. Some of them, like I call them, they're part of stims because they are stimulating things that help me relieve
Stress,
leave energy. So that kind of concludes the section for where we talk about parts of ADHD that people don't know about. We talked about that for quite a while. So the next point I wanted to bring up is, we can keep this kind of small, but generally some things with school and with childhood, some negative parts of ADHD, and some where the stigma behind ADHD comes from. So I know we talked about this in the first episode that we did, introducing ourselves and introducing our experiences and journeys with mental health and mental illness. And there are things that kids with ADHD or on the autism spectrum disorder do that give them bad reputation. And I know that you talked about it today in your childhood, you had some behavioral issues, and that's pretty characteristic to kids with those disorders. And I know we talked about fidget spinners specifically being mistaken for toys because kids use them in class. Kids that were neurotypical use them in class and were distracted by them, whereas somebody with ADHD would use them to focus more. So they were just seen as a toy. And I know that that's happened with a lot of fidgets. So is there anything there that you want to talk about more that we didn't talk about in the first episode?
I was at school. I had gone to the counselor's office in the morning, like before homeroom, because I was not feeling great mentally. And when I came back to class, my teacher said, I told the teacher, they asked why I didn't have my homework done, I think. And I said, I'm sorry, I'm working on that. I just haven't, I've been in a bad place lately and I've not had motivation or anything. And the teacher was just like, well, that, like, basically, like, that sucks for you. Like, get it done. And was, like, showing no sympathy for me. And it's like, it hurt. The fact that not really given the opportunity to fix things. Like, I'm so grateful for the teachers out there. That's like the ones that I've had that have been super patient with me.
The lack of empathy shown, the lack of education in schools, especially with teachers and trusted adults, definitely hurts kids with mental illnesses. And it happens throughout your entire school life. I know I remember in primary school, you talked already about the system that was in a lot of schools in like kindergarten through whatever grade was the each kid had these little like pockets that they had
pockets, like, or some
green
popsicle sticks, I think, stoplight,
whatever it was. Sorry, but like on a scale of like they were good today, they were a little disruptive today, or they were like doing bad today, whatever that was. For us, it was like green, yellow, red, like a stoplight. And kids who stand up in class, like these are the things that like got kids demerits, was standing up in class, moving around a lot, speaking loudly or screaming, refusing to speak in class, forgetting things, making noises, stimming, things that are characteristic to mental disorders, such as ADHD, autism spectrum disorder, a lot of different things. And they're seen as behavioral issues that need corrected through punishments, when in fact it's not something that they can fix. And I know that a lot of teachers weren't tolerant to that kind of behavior.
And still aren't.
Yeah, you're right. The fact that fidget spinners got banned in schools and a lot of fidget toys got banned in schools, when those are great silent things that kids who need to fidget can play with to help them focus, and they were seen as toys, and they were told to put the toys away, even to help them learn better. So that's lack of tolerance definitely hurt kids and hurt their education, when teachers, I'm sure, thought it was something that was distracting you, but if they were educated, I'm sure that would have been much less of an issue.
It's just the education system does not give any pity to people who are born differently.
So school is built on kids basically functioning to their fullest, focusing, being quiet, obeying rules, following directions, maintaining a schedule, and basically anything that somebody with ADHD or with autism struggles to do. And, you know, I was just wanting to ask, like, in a general sense in school, what things hinder your learning the most, and what do you think the school system could change to adhere to your needs, to other people's needs? It's a very broad question, but
I have issues with memorization sometimes. Like with band, it's easy. It's pretty easy. But I think that's different because that's muscle memory.
I think there's a lot that schools can do to be more tolerant to kids who do struggle with these things, especially because our school system is based off of things that kids with mental disorders and mental illnesses struggle with. And there's a small things kind of on the same page of, class presentations, how we're graded on those is you can't stutter, you have to make eye contact, you have to speak like loud enough, and just a lot of things that so many kids struggle with because of mental illnesses, and they have so many points taken off from them. It's specifically hard for kids who are not diagnosed or who don't have the resources to be able to cope with it as well as others, because you can't just get through a disorder. You can't just get through a mental illness. It's something that you have to learn how to cope with, and it takes a lot of time to work with, and it takes a lot of time to learn how to handle it, and a lot of kids aren't able to do that and don't have the resources to be able to do that. So the fact that they are graded much more, they're graded pretty harshly on that, and they're graded on what somebody who is an able-bodied person, who is a neurotypical person, would be able to do, but they are not neurotypical, they're not able-bodied. It's really, it's discrimination, I think.
I often use like little fidgets, like a fidget cube for my anxiety, and I believe sophomore year I would have it a lot in my art class because I really didn't know anyone, so I was kind of using it a lot. And at one point, this one kid, something went wrong. Someone came in who I didn't know, and I was like getting really anxious, and he was like, "Oh, are you gonna go play with your little cube now?" I didn't know how to deal with that, so I stopped using it. So I just ended up like playing with pencils and stuff, and I couldn't have the tools that I needed that helped me because other kids were rude about it.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. Please remember there is no shame in using tools to cope. The more we discuss mental health, the more we can remove stigma around living with mental health conditions.
This is our final episode of the season. As we end things, we would like to thank you for listening, and we encourage you to check out our Shaler Stand Together Instagram, as we will have a bonus episode on school and coronavirus. If you need someone to talk to, you can always use the link in the description for the mental health crisis hotlines and resources. These podcasts have been a part of the Stand Together summer projects, and we are not the only group working on these mental wellness activities. We also have a group who have been writing e-zines, including articles about panic and anxiety disorders, body dysmorphia and eating disorders, and the most recent one is on ADHD. They can all be found in the link in the description or on the Pittsburgh Stand Together website under projects. Join us next time as we continue our discussion on ADHD with school psychologists Erica Cicero and Meredith Gillow.